So the next step is probably the step that I think is the most interesting. The step is about searching, sorting, paginating, and reactive variables. And the interesting thing about search, sort, and pagination is that they're dependent on each other. So if I'm searching for something, I get some results. But if I'm searching for something but also limiting the results to just 5 results, then those two are connected. And if I'm sorting those and getting 5 results, but it's on a descending way, so I'll get different result than if it was ascending way. So this is why it's so interesting, and it's also interesting because there's a lot of examples of those in Angular, but they deal only with the client-side code. And with Meteor, we can bind all those properties to the server. So we can get a search all the way down to the server and get the immediate results based on the search, sorting, and pagination we got. So let's start. So the first thing we want to add is actually the server needs to know what parties he needs to publish. So we already have in the publish method exactly like the permissions for who needs to see what. But then we also want to add more options into that. So the way to do it, we can just send an options method in the end. So let's send those options as a parameter to the publish method, and let's send it also to the cursor. So we need to go. This will go here. Need to add here the options. Great. So now we need to send those options into our collection. Now, just about what options are possible to send, we have a link here in the collection find. This is in the Meteor docs, and there's explanations about what can I send in the options, like sort, skip, limit, fields, and it is all most of it is based on the Mongo API. So later on you can check that for more details. Now we need to add now our options into our JavaScript application, into our client side that we want to send with. So let's go to our parties list controller and let's add parameters. One will be scope.page. Let's just initialize it with 1. This is the page that we are currently on, like in the pagination. The next thing is going to be scope.perPage. And that means how many, we're just going to put 3 in here, but that means how many documents do we want to see at one page. So if we have 6, we'll have 2 pages. Or 7, we'll have 3 pages. And the next thing will be sort. So it could be ascending, descending, and we're going to initialize it by sorting by name and 1. And this is the sort syntax of MongoDB that you can read more on it later. Now, the thing is that right now we need to send our subscribe method parameters. So this type of writing subscribe method as a shorthand doesn't support sending parameters. So we need to cancel that and replace that with a Meteor subscribe function. So we do Meteor.subscribe, and then again we're sending parties, but this time we're gonna send, after parties, we're gonna send parameters, the option parameters. This is the same one we declared here. So, and this object will be will have like three sub objects. Three properties. One is limit, which is the same thing as per page. The second one will be a skip, which means that if we are in page 2, we need to skip 3 parties. And the third one will be a sort, and this will be the sort. So the only thing we're gonna place here is scope dot per page, and then here in skip we're gonna write scope page -1 times scope $scope per page, which will give us the number of documents we need to skip for a certain page. And in the sorting, we're just gonna send the sort parameter. Now, because those are binded into an UI elements, we need to make sure they are passed as integers. So we're just gonna place them inside a parse int function. So we're just gonna throw this in here, and the same thing about that. Parse int, and we're gonna place all of that inside. And yeah, and then that's that. Let's see what I've missed. Yeah, exactly. So those are the 3 parameters. Now, the next thing we need to do is also our collection needs to be sorted by the same thing. So if you read before how publish subscribe in Meteor works, it's basically just about what do the server needs to send to the client. But then the sorting on the client is happening only on the client. The reason we're sending sorting here is just because the way that this is connected to the limit and the skip. So it helps Meteor server to know what documents to send, but we actually need to sort it also on the client. So this thing, when we send here a collection, it's actually a shorthand, because inside Meteor collection we're turning it into a reactive cursor. But we can also send a reactive cursor. So let's do that. We're going to send function that will return a reactive cursor. And the reactive cursor would look like that. We're taking our parties, finding everything, but we're gonna sort it by scope sort, and this will make sure that our client-side collection will still be sorted as it should be. Now that's nice. Now we need to add the UI for the pagination, and we can just add. There is a good library, Angular library, that's called Meteor Utils pagination, and it has a Meteor package. So the only thing we need to do is to do Meteor add Urigo Angular Utils pagination. We'll add that package, and then we'll also add its dependency to our Angular app. We'll go to our app.js, and here add the dependency of Angular utils dot directives dot dir pagination. That's the name of the module we're going to use, of the directive we're going to use. Now, how do we use that on the UI? Let's go to our parties list, and what we need to change is actually change the ng-repeat to dir paginate, and then we're going to add filters that are relevant to this, Angular filters that are relevant into this package. So items per page, and we're going to send the per page scope variable, and we're going to send total items. For more information, you can read the dir paginate website for what each of those means, but basically the names tell by themselves. So here we're going to send parties count dot count, and we're gonna get that, and we'll see how we do that. And then this is just like the repeater, and we need to add the actual buttons of switching between the actual page buttons. So this is also prepared by dir paginate. So we're gonna go and write dir pagination controls, and this directive will make sure the right buttons will be there, and we just have to handle the event of clicking one of those buttons. So there is a built-in event that's called on page change, and we're just gonna call a scope function that's called page changed, and it has the new page number, and then we can handle that inside our controller. So to handle that inside the controller, let's do that. Let's go to our controller and add a function scope page changed. And this function will have a new page variable, and we're just going to make it equal to our page. And that's it. Now, you will see that we don't do any CSS right now. So the buttons might look ugly, but then you can do any CSS or styling that you want. I don't want to decide for you. Now the next thing we need to actually send to our directive is the total number of items. So let's do that. For that we can use the publish counts meteor package. So first let's add it to our meteor application. So it's DMs they publish counts. We're going to add that package, and now we're going to go to our publish method and publish the counts as well as the parties. So we do that like that. Go, and we have the publish counts creates a meteor collection that's called counts, and we need to do like that. Publish counts.publish, and then it looks exactly like the cursor here. So we're gonna write this, and then we're gonna call it number of parties. That's the variable name that we'll get on the client. And now we're gonna send the cursor. So we're gonna actually copy this parties.find with options. And the thing is, we're going to remove the options. Why? Because we always want to publish the full amount of the count. We don't want to publish and limit this this collection. So let's remove that. And but we do need to add a no ready true, so that our overall Meteor publish method won't think that once we've done that, everything is over and it can publish the method. So just after that parties find the regular publish find cursor will be ready, only then it will publish to the client. So now we have now we're publishing it to the client. We need to actually get that number on the client. So let's go here. And the interesting thing, another thing that our Meteor subscribe function gives us is a promise. So when the subscribe is ready, when all the information that was sent from the server to the client, we get a promise. So, and then we're going to call that promise. And inside that promise, we're going to define scope parties counts, and this will be equal to Meteor object, because we're going to bind to a specific object, and from the counts collection, and we're going to bind it into the ID of that collection that we defined here, number of parties. So that's like the ID of the counts, and we're going to pass also false in the end, so because we don't want to update that collection, we just want to, from the Angular side, we just want to get it from the Meteor side. So that's okay. Let's try to run that application. So let's go to our application. Let's add a third party, and let's add the fourth party. And you can see that something, it's not updated. We have 3, but we don't have everything here. Nothing. We don't have the pagination. So the reason is that this subscribe function is not happening twice. It happens only once. The Meteor doesn't know, or Angular doesn't know, to run this subscribe method again when something from those changes. So for that, we created a reactive variable. So Meteor has reactive variable. Reactive variable actually notifies that it was changing. And it's very similar to Angular. Angular has two-way data binding, so Angular knows that something has changed. But we need to combine those two systems because they are not talking together. So the first thing we need to do is actually surround everything that happens here on a Meteor thing that's called Meteor autorun. Meteor autorun knows, just reruns everything inside it once it knows something is changed. So just maybe it will be easier to understand once we write it. So meteor.autorun, then we're sending the current scope, which I'll explain in a second, and then we're sending the function that should be rerun every time something inside is changing. So we're gonna place everything here inside. Now Now I'll explain it again. So Meteor autorun will rerun that function every time that any one of the variables inside will reactively say, I've changed. Will pop up a changed event. Now that's okay, and we're also calling here, that's nice, but that's a Meteor thing. Angular won't know that this ran again. So this is why we're not calling Meteor autorun, but $Meteor autorun. Because that will give Angular the information that something happened here, and Angular would know to update itself when this function will rerun again. This is why we were calling Meteor autorun, and we were sending the scope. Now that's okay, but Angular we know something happened, but those variables here are scope variables, and Meteor, they are not reactive variables. Meteor won't know that they changed. Angular would know that. Meteor won't. So for that, we created a function called scope get reactively. And here, we're going to just take the name of the scope variable and send it as a string. This method will make that per page a variable reactive, which means that Angular will watch over it, and every time it will change, it will pop up a change event, just like a Meteor reactive variable. And now Meteor will know that if that thing would change, if that variable would change, it will rerun the autorun. And so now we're going to do the same, but for all the rest of the variables. So scope get reactively for page, and we're going to do the same of scope get reactively for per page. And of course for sorting. Now, what will happen here is that every time we're changing the page, every time we're changing the sorting, every time we're changing anything, then this subscribe function will rerun, and it means that this publish method will rerun as well. And then we will get the result again. Now, another thing that we need to do is here it's the same thing. So what we're doing inside $Meteor collection is that we're actually watching in a similar way, in more specific way than autorun on top of that cursor. But that cursor also needs to be reactive, and also needs that when the sorting is changed, this cursor will rerun again. So again, here we need to call scope get reactively and get the sort variable. Now, let's add a way to change the sorting actually. We don't have anything to do that. So let's go to the UI. And let's add somewhere here, let's add an H1 with parties. And let's add a select here. That will be binded to our order property. Now let's run here, option. Let's give it, this will be ascending. and we're going to do descending. And the value here will be equal to 1, and the value here will be equal to -1. Now, that's nice, but again, we need to watch that right now and make changes in our controller. So let's go back to our controller and do the angular way of autorun, which is scope $watch. Then we're going to watch our order property, and when it is changing, we're going to run that function. And inside that function, if we get order property that is defined, then we're going to change the scope sort into a variable that sorts name by the scope order property. Now this might be a string, so we're just gonna parse int this thing as well, just to make sure it's a number. Now also let's initialize it in the beginning, so let's just add scope dot order property equal to 1. So that's nice. Let's run our app again and see if it works. Let's refresh. And first of all, let's see if that works. So we can see we have ascending and descending, but let's add another party, and we don't have our pagination. We can't see our pagination, so let's check that. My guess is that the parties count is returning something false. Obviously, always copy and paste. Now let's rerun our server and see if it works. Yes, and you can see that we have pagination. Again, it looks ugly, but it works now. If we're changing the descending, you can see it still works, and it's still on the same page, and everything is okay. So now everything is reactive from the client to the server. And that's pretty impressive. And that shows you how Angular and Meteor works great together, and you have a three-way data binding or full-stack reactivity in a very helpful way. Now the last thing we want to add is actually a search. So let's go to our publish method and add a search variable that will return parties according to that search. So let's add search string. And now the way to search, we will just send a regex expression to filter our results. So instead of learning, you can learn about regex more, but I'm just gonna copy the thing I did before already, and just copy it from here. And then we can go here. We're going to place it both in here on the counts, on the actual results that we're returning, but also on the counts, because if we're searching for something, then we want to know only how many of those are there and filter the amount of total parties and the pages according to that. So we're going to also edit here. Another thing we want to do is to actually make sure that if we get search string as null, we're gonna return it as a empty string, so it will return everything and not nothing. And now the next thing we need to do is actually add that to our UI. So let's go to our parties list, and here let's just add an input and bind. This is from type search, and let's bind it into a search variable. You can also add a placeholder search. Now let's add this search variable into our publish method, into our subscribe method on the client. So this is a parameter, so we need to send it here, and we're gonna go scope.search. But that's okay, but then again, every time we will type that search, we want the autorun to rerun, and we want Meteor to know what's happening. So again, we're gonna call get reactively and get that search reactively, and now it will rerun again every time we will run it. So let's run up our application again, and now let's search for 4, and you see it happen instantly. And let's search for party, and we're searching only by the name, so let's search that, and we have 2, and we can change our ascending and descending, and everything is happens instantly, reactively across Angular and Meteor, and all the different variables combine together to get our results. And some of you who know Angular might have got the same thing on Angular, but only on the client side. Noticed here that it goes all the way to the server side and handles both the search expression, both the both the sorting, both the pagination, and also the actually the permissions. So if it's not a public party, or it's not my party, I won't be able to see it as well. So that's pretty amazing. Now there's another problem in here. If I'll go here inside the party details and go back, this thing will be broken, because inside our party details controller, we're actually subscribing to all our parties, and we get everything to the client, and by that we're destroying the way of doing that. So we need to actually, when we get here, we need to start and stop our subscription. So again, we're gonna move this into meteor.subscribe function, and we want to, once we get that, when we get the promise, we have as a parameter the subscription handle. So the subscription handle has a we can call subscription handle.stop, and it will stop the subscription, and then we can do it all over again. But we don't want to call it here, so we want to save it somewhere and then call it when we go out of this controller. We get out of this controller. Let's just like initialize a variable, subscription handle, and let's call it a handle, and then just like initialize it with that. And now when the controller gets closed, we want to call that subscription close. So we have the scope has an event that's called destroy, which happens when we destroy the controller when we get out. So then we can call a function. And this function can get the subscription handle dot stop. Later on, we can probably add a simpler way to add it to any of the routes of the UI router or something. So we'll define all the subscription we need in a specific route, and then the routes, when we get out of it, will also be responsible of just stopping everything. But for now, that's what we do. Now let's test it again. Let's rerun our app, and we can see that right now everything is working, the search is working, and then when we're going in and going out back again, everything still works. So that was the search and pagination and sorting and reactive var step. It's a very important step to understand a lot of Meteor's way of doing stuff and Angular way and how they combine together. I will urge you to read this chapter again and again until you understand everything. It will help you a lot for writing your own applications.